An explosive new leak reveals that members of the Communist Party of China, a crucial ally and even a tool of the deep state, have infiltrated every Western institution you can think of: banks, pharmaceutical companies, defense contractors, governments, you name it. There are members of this mass murdering party there. Stay tuned and I'll tell you more. In late 2020, an explosive new leak of a list of Communist Party of China members, mostly centered around the Shanghai region, was revealed. Something like 2 million names on that list, which makes up about 2% of the total membership of the Communist Party of China. And most of the list has still not been released. Just a small number of the names have been released. But from what we know already, it's clear that we have a major, major problem. Some of the things we know is that many of the most important Western banks, the most important Western pharmaceutical companies, tech companies, and even defense contractors are absolutely packed with members of this mass murdering political party. And really, political party is not even a real proper term to describe this. The Communist Party of China is a group of savages, a group of gangsters who have murdered more people than any other group in human history. And unfortunately, if you go back and watch our episodes on this topic, it is a critical ally of the deep state. In fact, going back right to the beginning, it was members of the deep state in the United States that helped Mao take power over China. It was also members of the deep state, people like David Rockefeller, people like Henry Kissinger, who built communist China into a superpower. And now their minions are everywhere, threatening the very future of the United States. We've got a few more episodes where we're going to be talking about how they've co opted the media in the Western world and also how they're co opting the political class in America. So, a whole lot more. But I want to start today's episode dealing with this incredible leak that we have. Now, the American media has said almost nothing about it, and that's not going to be surprising once we get to our episode on how the Communist Party of China has taken control of the American media. But let's start with why this is problematic. So we've got members of the Communist Party of China all up and down our critical institutions in the Western world. Why is this a problem, right? If we had Democrats there, it wouldn't be a big deal. If we had Republicans there, it wouldn't be a big deal. Why is this such a big deal if they're members of the Communist Party of China? Well, every member of this mass murdering party takes an oath when they become a member. And according to the oath, they promise to, and I'm quoting here, guard party secrets, be loyal to the party, work hard, fight for communism throughout my life, and never betray the party. Okay, in practice, this means that every member of the CCP is a diehard communist committed for life to advancing communism, which is really slavery, mass murder, wickedness condensed, and they are a potential spy for this murderous regime. In fact, the Communist government of China even passed a law saying that every Chinese person must aid the intelligence services when asked to do so. So every member of the Communist Party of China is a spy. Now, here's what we know from the partial list that has been released already. There are over 120 members of the CCP employed by vaccine makers: Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and GlaxoSmithKline. These are some of the ones that were involved in making the COVID vaccine. What if, and I mean, the Communist Party of China has openly and repeatedly expressed their desire to create a new world order, multipolar world order. They've had some of their top generals threaten to nuke hundreds of American cities. And yet here we have members of this murderous party working in our pharmaceutical companies, potentially stealing secrets, but even more dangerous. What if they were to sabotage these processes? If they're making these emergency vaccines, they haven't been tested over the long term. Who knows what that might do to you? And if you have members of the Communist Party of China involved in this process, you can't even sue these companies. That adds a whole new level of threat. We also have the national security implications, which are huge. Okay, from the data that we've seen already from this leak, we know that there are hundreds of members of the Communist Party of China employed by Boeing, by Airbus, and by Rolls-Royce. Okay, these are all critical Western defense contractors. They create the airplanes that our air forces use to defend our nations. Okay, they create weapons systems that our militaries use to defend our nations. We also know that there were numerous members of the Communist Chinese Party at a French defense contractor called Thales. And almost incredibly, we even have an admission from a top Communist Party operative working at a university where he admits that members of the CCP have infiltrated the highest echelons of power in the United States. We'll come back to that when we talk about the political infiltration of the CCP in the United States. From this leak, we also know that there are hundreds of CCP members. And remember, this is just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the total party membership. So if we already know of hundreds, there are probably thousands more. And we know there are hundreds now embedded in very, very sensitive positions in Western universities. Some of these guys are studying nuclear engineering. They're studying aerospace engineering. They're learning bioweapon applications, okay, while they're studying at our universities, often subsidized by our taxpayers. Then they go back to China and they put all this information to work for the People's Liberation Army, the mass murdering dictatorship's military, guys. Think about the implications of this. And even setting the national security implications of that aside, what about on the economic front, right? They're going into our companies, they're going into our research universities, they're stealing this technology, they're stealing this know-how, they're taking them back to companies owned and operated by the Communist Party of China for the benefit of the Communist Party of China. Meanwhile, Western companies are pouring millions and billions of dollars into research. Communist Chinese operatives are just coming, stealing all that research and taking it back to China. Okay, our own counterintelligence services say these tactics are costing our companies hundreds of billions of dollars every year. And this is happening with the complicity of the deep state, folks. Remember, Donald Trump even wanted to just shut down travel for a little while between China to avoid spreading the CCP virus in the United States. And all the elements of the deep state cried foul and suggested there was something wrong with that. Guys, we are under attack, not just by the Communist Party of China, but by the fifth column in the United States that created and built it up and is now helping them to steal all our technology, steal our military know-how. It's been going on for such a long time. We also know now, and we knew this even before the leak, that there are huge numbers of CCP operatives working within the big technology companies, including, by the way, YouTube, which is trying to prevent you from seeing this, right? We are one of the most shadow banned channels that I know of. You almost cannot find our content even when you're looking for it, and that is, of course, by design. We know that YouTube, we know that Facebook, we know that Google, we know that all these companies have been hiring and working with communist Chinese operatives who have expertise in censorship, right? They get trained over in China. How do you silence people? How do you prevent information from getting out? Then they bring them over here and put them to work in these so-called social media companies to manipulate you, to censor conservatives, to censor Christians, to censor people who speak out about the deep state. Now, this problem is well known in our government. In fact, our U.S. Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, recently pointed out that Beijing poses the greatest threat to freedom since World War II. He said that this mass murdering government wants to dominate the planet economically, militarily, and technologically. Okay, they're targeting our lawmakers. We're going to do an episode on that. They're using blackmail. They're using honeypots and honey traps. And we know, again, that many members of the elite in the United States, the Council on Foreign Relations, and others have been aiding and abetting this process at every step of the way. Now, this list that was leaked, it goes back to 2016. It's got about 2 million CCP members from the Shanghai area. That's China's financial capital. By the way, did I mention that they have hundreds of their agents in the banking companies of the Western world, including HSBC, including Standard Charter, and others? And remember, we're just dealing with a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of this leak so far. We also know that they have CCP members working at the highest levels in Western consulates, right? Mostly this has been reported in Britain, as incredible as that sounds. And just from what the British press has been reporting, they now know that a senior official at the British consulate in Shanghai, which houses intelligence officers from the UK security services, is a CCP member, right? They've got over 600 members of the CCP working at British banks like HSBC and Standard Charter, giving them access to all kinds of very sensitive financial information, including potentially on Chinese dissidents and other people around the world. And at least in Britain, the political leaders are speaking out. The former leader of the Conservative Party, Ian Duncan Smith, published a column in the Daily Mail, one of the few newspapers that has talked about this. And he said, and I'm quoting here, this investigation proves that members of the Chinese Communist Party are now spread around the globe, with members working for some of the world's most important multinational corporations, academic institutions, and our own diplomatic services. He also pointed out that this is not like, regular people from a regular political party. He pointed out that they're operating concentration camps and re-education camps, and that they're, persecuting people and slaughtering dissidents, right? He went on to say, the government must now move to expel and remove any members of the Communist Party of China from our consuls throughout China. He also said that we need to figure out how all these communist operatives and agents were able to infiltrate these institutions. He said it's not just wrong, it is immoral. And he says also, we have failed to recognize that at the core of China's system is a system of ideas and values that not only runs contrary to ours, but seeks to overcome it. Well, it's nice to see a person in the United Kingdom with a brain and the courage to speak out against these things. They also interviewed a Foreign Office diplomat, China expert Matthew Henderson, and he told the Daily Mail that this is yet further proof of how China has inveigled its way into the British establishment. Said, we are dancing with rabid wolves, intent on driving a wedge between Britain and America, overthrowing democracy and outstripping the West. Okay, guys, this comes very shortly after another scandal, this time involving our neighbor to the north in Canada. They had Justin Trudeau, we now know from leaked documents, invited communist Chinese soldiers into Canada to receive very sensitive, very specialized cold weather military training from the Canadian military. Canadian military people were like, what? And Justin Trudeau, the radical left-wing Prime Minister of Canada, insisted that it take place. And this was, by the way, right after the dictatorship kidnapped Canadian citizens to use as bargaining chips. We've got similar stuff going on in America. We'll talk about the political infiltration of America very, very soon. They've got members of Congress and much more. We'll talk about those very, very soon. Now, this list of CCP members, it was leaked on an instant messaging app. This list was then provided to the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, which is lawmakers from around the world dedicated to reining in this dictatorship. And they now have released parts of that list to Western media outlets. Naturally, the communist dictatorship in China is like, hey, what's the big deal, right? This is a quote from one of their mouthpieces. We urge the media to abandon ideological bias and Cold War mentality and view China, the Communist Party of China, and China's development in a rational and impartial manner. Okay? Yeah, you should view it in a rational manner, right? Like, 100 million murder victims by this party. What are you so worried about? Come on, just let them have all your nuclear secrets, right? Oh, wait, Bill Clinton already did that. We'll talk about that again. But just for those of you who don't remember, some of you might be too young. Some of you might not have been paying attention to legitimate media. You still might have been watching fake media. But back in 1999, we at the New American did an incredible special report in the magazine. We weren't the only ones who reported this, but unfortunately, most of the media tried to ignore it. We called the issue Chinagate. Treason in the White House. And what was exposed was that President Clinton, had helped the People's Liberation Army gain access to the most sensitive American military secrets and technology, and then cover up crimes of the regime. And this all happened in exchange for massive unlawful campaign contributions. And by the way, the Communist Chinese continued funneling money to the Clintons through the Clinton Foundation, which was a giant scam, a criminal operation, for decades. Okay. Now, American military leaders were very upset about this betrayal. This is what former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Admiral Thomas Moorer said. He said, President Clinton promised to restrain those who ordered the Tiananmen Square massacre, but he has now allowed these men whose hands are stained with the blood of martyrs of freedom into the highest reaches of our military defenses and made available to them significant portions of our advanced military technology. Obama, of course, invited communist Chinese troops to train on U.S. soil. We'll talk about more about that when we get into the political subversion in the United States by the CCP. And again, it's been going on for so long, folks. And once you understand that Communist China is the model for the New World Order, once you understand that the Communist Party of China is a threat because it was built up into a threat by people like David Rockefeller, people like George Soros, people like Michael Bloomberg, people like Bill Gates, then you realize the extent of the problem that we have. There's concrete evidence that they were involved in the effort to steal the 2020 election and put Biden, who they have a lot of dirt on, who they have a very close relationships with, back into the White House. Guys, we're in very, very serious trouble, and if we're going to defeat the deep state, we're going to have to understand the links with and the role of the Communist Party of China, their relationship to the deep state. We actually have a whole chapter on that in my book on the deep state, the invisible government behind the scenes. That chapter, let me pull it up here for you. It's called China, a tool and creation of the deep state. It's on page 109 if you don't have this book yet. Guys, serious times, serious issues. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Newman. This is Behind the Deep State. Stay tuned. We'll be back again next week with even more information.
You know, it's no surprise that Facebook and YouTube and all the titans and tyrants of Silicon Valley, the big tech companies, are censoring our content. We might not even be on these platforms for too much longer with the way things are going, folks. That's why it's all the more important that you head over to thenewamerican.com. You can sign up for our daily, weekly, or even monthly headlines. They'll get emailed directly to you. Better yet, you can subscribe to the New American Magazine. You'll get these delivered right to your door. And they can't censor a printed magazine. So hey, get over to thenewamerican.com, sign up today, and stay informed in the fight for freedom.